Breaking news from Washington. Now for continuing coverage, we go to our colleagues in New York.
Thanks for being with
A Fox News alert, a frightening false alarm for people in Hawaii. Thousands of people receiving an emergency alert on their phones just a short time ago. The warning heading, quote, ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. About 10 minutes after the alert was sent out, Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard confirmed the warning was fake. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new hour inside America's News Headquarters. I'm Kelly Wright.
And I'm Laura Ingle. Hawaii emergency officials say the alert was a mistake, but it's unclear how or why it was sent. Hawaii has been beefing up security measures, as you know, amid rising nuclear threats with North Korea. The state tested its warning sirens last year for the first time since the Cold War.
And we are joined now on the phone by foreign affairs journalist Gordon Chang. He's author of the book Nuclear Showdown: North Korea Takes Over the World. Gordon, good of you to join us today, but a very bad and tumultuous time for a while there for people in Hawaii who received this warning on their cell phones to take shelter. What do you make of this?
Yeah, this is a real concern, and the reason is, first of all, the warning system obviously failed, and the question that people are going to have to ask is whether it was hacked. If it was it hacked by a foreign power? So there are all sorts of issues that we're going to have to deal with. But this does highlight the fact that the North Koreans at this particular time can actually land a missile in the United States. The one thing they haven't been able to do is to master some of the heat shielding and the guidance that is necessary to actually land a weapon. But nonetheless, they're getting very close. And so this is a necessary wake-up call for the Americans about what the North Koreans can do should they want to.
Gordon, point of interest here, you had mentioned that it's a possibility that the system was hacked. And oddly enough, before we went on air, I had asked our producer, well, gee, you know, what would cause this kind of false alarm? Could it be that there was some sort of cyber security and a hack that took place? If that's the case, we know that North Korea has hacked us in the past, and we can't cast aspersions to them, but they would be a likely character in this.
Well, they certainly would be, and they have very developed cyber capabilities. They've been using this against the South Koreans, against South Korean banks, for instance, and also, of course, against Sony Pictures Entertainment. In November 2014, they attacked Sony, and they exfiltrated hundreds of terabytes of data from the business. And of course, North Korea has only improved its capabilities since then. So if this was indeed the North Koreans, we've got some big questions to ask, not only them, but also the two countries that carry North Korea's internet traffic. That would be China and Russia.
We're also getting worried that this was an act of human error. If that is the case, and it's one of human error, what does the United States have to do in order to protect our systems from human error like this that sends people fleeing into panic? And albeit this was a false alarm, which is a good thing, but what do we do to make sure that our systems are operating at the fullest capacity with the most accuracy and integrity? Well,
the important thing is that these systems haven't been used for a very long time. And, you know, obviously at this point, you know, they probably haven't had the practice, the training, and the procedures for all of this. So this is going to be an issue not just for Hawaii, but for other American localities which have these warning systems.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but based on that, based on what we've seen here today and what you've mentioned about, you know, we're out of practice, we're a little bit rusty on this, do you foresee a time based on the apprehensions that we have about North Korea that we could be going into a situation where we start having drills and having testings?
Well, you know, that's always possible. You know, for many Americans, including me, that almost seems inconceivable right now. You know, we have lived, of course, with a threat of Chinese and Russian nuclear weapons, but they're stable states. The thing about North Korea is we're not entirely sure about the fluidity of that regime and whether Kim Jong-un, the ruler, has firm grip over all elements of the regime. So this is going to be something that we're going to face because in the not-too-distant future, about a year from now, he will be able to land a nuke on the American city of his choice. So we've got to make sure that we can deter the North Koreans. And we have not had those deterrence discussions with North Korea that we have had, of course, with the Soviets and with the Chinese.
So one of the things I want to bring out here as a point of clarification, U.S. military, and I'm quoting here, has detected no ballistic missile threat to Hawaii. Earlier message was sent in error, and State of Hawaii will send out a correction message as soon as possible. And that was from Commander Dave Benham, spokesman for the U.S. Pacific Command. Lucas Thomason also on top of that from our Pentagon. He's our producer and reporter there. And Chad Pergram, also from our Capitol Hill, explaining that members of Congress who are from Hawaii have also tweeted out information like Representative Tulsi Gabbard that this was not, this was a false alarm. And so we want to make that very clear. But again, you can imagine the panic that was going through the hearts and minds of the people living there in Hawaii and people who visit there. This is one of the premier destinations in the United States as well as throughout the world. So one can only imagine what was going on for what we understand might have been as much as 30 minutes.
Yes. And also the Japanese have been receiving alerts as the North Koreans have arced missiles over the Japanese islands. And so we get to a point where this is going to become more and more an occurrence where these alerts are sent out as North Korea launches missiles. You know, at some point, we're going to, as I said, they're going to have to perfect our systems. We're going to have to get much better at this. We haven't done this since the Cold War for good reason. But nonetheless, we've got to understand that it's not just North Korea, but it's going to be other countries.
Well, exactly. The question I was going to ask you is, since you're talking about North Korea, and yeah, we're aware of what's going on with North Korea and Kim Jong-un and his penchant for developing and testing nuclear weapons. He's done it. He's been testing before. The president has been very tough with him. We do know that North Korea and South Korea have begun to have talks, albeit they have not really talked about this issue. We know that China has a role to play in quelling and curbing the appetite, the nuclear appetite of North Korea. But the other country that one has to be concerned with, and it has to be brought up, is Iran. What about that as being a threat?
Yeah, absolutely, because the Iranians have paid the North Koreans an estimated $2.5 to $3 billion a year for their various forms of cooperation. We know that cooperation includes ballistic missiles, because if you scrape the paint off of many of Iran's missiles, they're basically North Korean. And so whatever North Korea can do, we can be pretty sure that within 2 years, 3 years, the Iranians will be able to do as well.
For those of you who are just tuning in, and you may be wondering what Gordon Chang, who's our guest right now, and I have been talking about, is Laura Ingalls. She's here as well. We started the top of the show with an alert that Hawaii had received some sort of alert about a ballistic missile that was incoming, meaning that it's coming and it's going to approach you. And the alert also stated that they needed to take cover and shelter immediately. We want to stress, we have to stress, that this was a false alarm. Our Pentagon or members of our military urging us that it was a human error. We're talking to Gordon Chang, who's an expert on these types of situations as it relates to North Korea. We do not know if it came from there. We do not know if it came from Iran, but Gordon has been trying to, if you will, extrapolate and elaborate on what types of things where we could encounter in the weeks and months ahead. Gordon, is it really that serious we could see this happen again where we have more false alarms?
Well, yeah, it could very well occur. I mean, we need to do a lot more practicing and drilling. We've been out of that business since the end of the Cold War. But we know that the North Koreans are threatening the United States because the North Koreans actually said that they were going to land missiles within 30 to 40 nautical miles of Guam,
Yeah.
which is American territory.
That's disturbing and disconcerting, and you're talking about testing. I want to bring in my colleague, Laura Ingalls, who's sitting right here beside me. And Laura, as Gordon's talking, I'm reminded of when I was a child, and we had to go hide under the tables,
yeah, we had
under the school desk. Remember those
That's
days?
Right.
And I'm thinking, are we getting back to that type of stage? And so it's really disconcerting.
And
to
we're
see
going
this
to
happen.
that video, and we are hearing those sirens coming out. And you can only imagine. I mean, Hawaii is one thing, and we've been talking about Hawaii for a long time. But just imagine wherever you are watching us right now, whether it's New York, California, or in the middle of the United States. This could have happened with anybody. Getting those alerts on your phone. You've got a weather system coming your way. It's the same sort of thing that these folks got in Hawaii, getting this. And it said on the original, and again, we want to stress this was a false alarm, but the original text message said, "This is not a drill." Imagine the fear. Imagine those 35 minutes of waiting to get that clarification and thinking about your children, the people that are around you, your elderly, getting them to a safe location. That is what the people of Hawaii and the visitors of Hawaii just went through, Kelly.
So, Gordon, what Laura just explained, and you've explained it as well, but let's look at the bigger picture here. People in Hawaii are conducting their normal lives. People in America conducting their normal lives. Do we want to go back to a time, a dark period of the Cold War era, where we're also thinking that we have to be more vigilant? Now, we know we have to be vigilant about terrorism. That way, if we see anything, we have to report anything. Now it's getting to, this could be leading to another dimension, as you've stated, where we have to start being aware of not only our surroundings, but what could be coming in from the outside.
Well, yes, and the North Koreans have threatened that. As I mentioned, they have threatened to put missiles near the shores of Guam, which is U.S. territory in the Pacific. They now actually have a missile, the Hwasong-15, that can reach any part of the American homeland. They haven't perfected some of the other techniques that they would need in order to actually detonate a nuclear device on American soil.
And so our military, last question, our military, which is always practicing readiness and has the capability, has to be more ready than ever before and more vigilant than ever before, which of course they are. And they were quick to point out, Gordon, that this was a false alarm. Gordon Chang, thank you for joining us and shedding some perspective on this false alarm that took place in Hawaii. Nonetheless, caused a lot of panic and a lot of frayed nerves for people receiving that first information of a terror alert and then hearing the sirens, as Lauren and I were just talking about. So we'll continue to follow the story. Gordon Chang, thank you.
What an incredible afternoon we are having here as we're following.
It never stops.
And we're following this information and an incredible interview there as well. And as we continue to follow this breaking news situation, again, we want to reiterate that this was a false alarm in Hawaii. When residents there and visitors, anybody who had a smartphone, a cell phone, got this alert that there was an incoming missile and to seek shelter. The original message said, "This is not a drill." So just let that sit with you and imagine what that must have felt like to look at that. We want to bring in Captain Ben Collins. He's a U.S. Army Special Forces veteran, Green Beret, and he served 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan. Sir, thank you for being with us and thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
All right, you're on the phone with us now. I want to ask you, Captain, just your initial thoughts when you heard about this false alarm.
Well, I actually was stationed in Hawaii for a good number of years, and I can say that I think people in Hawaii certainly feel a lot more vulnerable. There is still the history that goes back to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. In fact, just for historical sake, but many of the buildings that we had on base actually still had, bullet holes in the walls from that attack. So it speaks to, the feeling. You've got, over 1 million people, there. They do have this sense of vulnerability and the sense, and I think it just points to the reality of the threat that, this, even though it was, sent in as a mistake, that so many probably at first, read didn't think it was a mistake.
Sure. It was definitely put out there that this is not a drill and to seek shelter. And as we talk about and think about what's happening right now behind the scenes, obviously a lot of people are working to figure out exactly what happened. If this was a human error, if somebody hit a button accidentally that sent it out to all these phones, or if somebody was able to hack into the emergency alert system and get this type of message out. You know, what are your thoughts on that? Because obviously there are a lot of people looking at this right now saying, look, the system has to be foolproof. We've got to make sure that if this was, in fact, a human error, this never happens again. Although on the same right, you want people to be prepared and to be ready to act if something like this were to ever happen.
Well, that's true, and especially I think, you know, Hawaii deals with. I mean, I remember the sirens that used to go off, you know, for the tsunami warning. You know, at the end of the day, I think that, you know, this was a terrifying, probably hard lesson to learn. This was a human error. It was a mistake. It was a human error. But as you said, you know, we need to make sure that this, you know, does not happen again. But we're far from the days of duck and cover, right? Getting underneath your desk. You know, it's rehearsals for this kind of thing. So on the one hand, I'm glad to see that they are that forward-leaning in terms of preparation, where they have the ability to send out these type of alerts. You know, the missiles that we have seen North Korea test are a little bit different than the missiles that we've seen on parade. But estimates say that, you know, somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes would be the amount of time from a missile being detected to the citizens being able to get to safety. But it's what comes after that as well. If there is an attack, you have to have, you know, hospitals and trauma centers and et cetera, and they have to drill. So there is a need to drill. There's a need to be ready. You want to be prepared, but you do need to make sure that you don't have something like this ever happen again, because what a terrifying experience for 15 minutes wondering, you know, what's about to happen to your loved ones.
Absolutely. And you know, we're getting reports, Captain, that there was a 35-minute, possibly a 35-minute gap in between that first alarm and then the correction that went out to let people know that it was a false alarm, that there was a mistake that was made. And I want to get back to what you said about drilling and about the need for that. And as we move forward in the story, we'll move forward rapidly. You know, what do the people of Hawaii and therefore the people of America really need to know about being prepared and doing these types of drills? Kelly referenced that with Gordon Chang about, you know, we used to do this as children. A lot of us remember doing those drills. Is that something that we see in the future? And how often should those drills take place?
Well, so again, preparation is key. I think that you know, certainly the government has a responsibility, and, you know, so do we as citizens have a responsibility to be prepared. You know, I'm not suggesting that we all need to go out and start digging the old Cold War bunkers in our backyards. But this is a serious threat. I mean, and I think that if they do it with the same, you know, severity and seriousness that they do with tsunami warnings, where everybody understands what that drill is, you know, I think a lot of it is probably, you know, similar, at least on what actions we ask the citizens to take in terms of finding cover, getting inside, getting indoors, getting under, you know, getting to a place of safety. But I think it's also, you know, the distinction here is there would be a tremendous amount of civil-military coordination that would have to work in terms of hospitals and medical care and emergency teams and how they deploy. And we've seen, you know, some of that for you know, chemical and biological stuff. If you go back a few years, kind of that post 9/11, there was a big uptick in a lot of those rehearsals being done. And so I certainly assume and certainly hope that the civilian officials as well, that the hospital staff, you know, in terms of food, emergency, Red Cross, all that stuff has to be ironed out and actually gone through a drill to make sure that if this actually happens. So, you know, if there's some silver lining in this, it'll be interesting to be able to kind of look through what occurred in that 35-minute time span to really understand, you know, if what did actually happen.
Right.
Did people take the alert seriously? Did hospitals stand up? Were trauma teams stood up? I think that will be an indicator of how prepared we really are, because we just had a live, you know, drill, non-drill.
Right.
So to speak.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see videos. I'm sure we'll be getting those images in as we move throughout the day of people in the street, what it looked like in Hawaii on the Big Island when this occurred. Again, if you're just joining us, the people of Hawaii received a false alarm a short while ago indicating there was an incoming missile to seek shelter. It was not a drill. That was the original message. It turned out to be a false alarm, thankfully, thank God. And then there was a correction sent out, and we're trying to digest it now and figure out exactly how this happened and what will be done next. Captain Ben Collins, I want to thank you very much for your time in joining us today here at Fox News.
Laura, as you were talking, I was following what's going on Twitter here, and I'll point out to you real quickly. We got someone saying, this was my phone when I woke up just now, explaining what they saw, and that was ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii, seeking immediate shelter. And this person went on to say, I'm in Honolulu, Hawaii, and my family is on the North Shore. They were hiding in the garage. My mom and sister were crying. It was a false alarm, but belting a lot of people, or bolting a lot of people are shaking. I'm sorry, I misread that. But betting a lot of people are shaken. And then U.S. Pacific Command, it tweeted as well. U.S. Pacific Command has detected no ballistic missile threat to #Hawaii. Earlier message was sent in error and was a false alarm. And Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who represents Hawaii, wanted to say this is a false alarm. We have to stress that. There is no incoming missile to Hawaii. I have confirmed with officials there is no incoming missile. But again, getting back to that mom and sister hiding in the garage crying, that's a nightmarish situation for that family and other families. So on the phone right now, I was just talking about her, and we were alluding to her, and her tweet is Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. Good of you to join us today. Bad time right now, but at least it's good to know that this has been a false alarm. Congresswoman, what happens next to allay the fears and make sure that we don't have a situation like this occurring again where it's in a false alarm?
Aloha. You know, we're still working to try to get the word out and make sure that everybody in Hawaii has gotten the message that this was indeed a false alarm. As soon as I was able to, as soon as I heard of the alert, I immediately called Hawaii state officials, confirmed that there was actually no incoming ballistic missile to Hawaii, that it was a false alarm, and started getting on the phone, tweeting it out, getting the message out to Hawaii local media as quickly as possible. And I was able to reach them before they had gotten any other word in many cases. So we're still trying to make sure that people actually know what happened. And we're starting to get to the bottom of, we'll be working to get to the bottom of what actually happened and why this message went out mistakenly.
Well, you know, this has caused quite a bit of pandemonium out there and panic for a lot of people. I was just reading, you probably heard me talking about one tweet from a young lady who was talking about her mother and daughter were actually crying and hiding in the garage. So as you move forward, there's the relief of knowing that this was a false alarm, but how do you prepare people to overcome this and move on and put it behind them and yet be prepared and be vigilant for the possibility in this crazy world that something like this could in fact happen?
Yeah, well, this is the stark reality that the people of Hawaii face, and what it's going to be like if that nuclear strike, that missile comes to Hawaii. You know, cell phones all across the state, over 1 million people in my home state of Hawaii got this alert saying a ballistic missile is headed your way, take shelter. This is not a drill. So what they have just gone through is that immediate reality of knowing they've got 15 minutes to take shelter. Where can they take shelter? Where can they take shelter that will protect them and their families from a nuclear bomb coming their way? This just points to the failure of our country's leaders for decades that have put Hawaii in this country in this position today, that the people of Hawaii just went through this today, that stark reality.
Given what you've just said, and given the facts of what just happened, this, in my mind, in the minds of a lot of people who are in defense and in Congress and even the President of the United States, it makes one think, how tough do you need to be with North Korea? How tough should one be with Iran? these are countries that pose a nuclear threat to the United States. And we've heard Kim Jong-un say many times that he is developing a missile that will have the capability of reaching the United States. So at this juncture, based on what's happened here, albeit a false alarm, which is a great thing, what do you say in terms of moving us forward with the posture of readiness and vigilance and having the resolve to say to North Korea, stop it, end it, let's get this done?
Well, first of all, one thing that I've been calling for a very long time is for those direct talks to actually happen between the United States and North Korea, between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, so that we can de-escalate and ultimately reach that objective of eliminating this nuclear threat from North Korea. Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. North Korea does. This is the reality the people of Hawaii have faced for quite some time. This is not some far-off potential possibility in the future. This is a very real thing. There is no time to waste. Previous administrations, both Democrat and Republican, have failed to take this rising threat seriously, bringing us to the position that we are in today. And these administrations have said time and again, well, we won't talk to North Korea because, we won't talk to them until they get rid of their nuclear weapons. They have all these preconditions that are just not realistic. And unfortunately, that is continuing with this administration today. President Trump is not taking this threat seriously, as the people of Hawaii have just gone through the reality of what this really is. He needs to engage directly, talk directly with North Korea so that we can remove this nuclear threat, so that we can achieve peace and make it so that my family and the families in Hawaii and the families all across this country are not going to have to go through what the people of Hawaii just went through, are not going to have to live with the reality of this nuclear threat.
And Congresswoman, have you had the occasion to speak directly to President Trump? As you know, he's been extremely tough with regard to rhetoric about Kim Jong-un and North Korea. He's been extremely tough, and South Korea leadership even thanked him for his toughness because it led, they believe, to talks, the first talks in 2 years between the North and the South in terms of preparing for the Winter Olympics. But have you been able to have the occasion to talk to the president directly and state what you just stressed here?
I met with President Trump just a couple of weeks after he won his election back in 2016, talked about a number of different threats to this country, including this threat to the people of Hawaii and this country from North Korea. I have not spoken to him directly since. However, I've made it clear time and again to members of his administration and speaking out publicly about the need for direct talks without preconditions with North Korea to find a peaceful, negotiated outcome to remove this nuclear threat that exists for the people of my home state and this country every single day. The time for posturing and maneuvering and all of these different things, this has been going on for far too long. They've got to sit down across the table from each other and figure this thing out to remove this threat.
Have you been able to speak to the Hawaii governor, and what response has the state of Hawaii had in terms of this human error that took place to put out this false alarm? You stated earlier at the top of this interview that an investigation was going on, that you would find out what happened. So while we can talk about North Korea and cybersecurity and hacks and all of that, there's still a responsibility that we ourselves have to make sure that we're acting fit and proper in terms of how we handle our nuclear preparedness, defense preparedness. So have you received any response from the state and from the governor?
It's been a little over an hour since this alert went out, and I've spent all of that time getting the word out to the people of Hawaii that this is not a real threat, that this is a false alarm. I will be reaching out to the governor and to civil defense officials in Hawaii to figure out exactly what happened, what went wrong, how this occurred, and make sure that this never happens again.
Congresswoman, you're a human being. These are your constituents. Your constituents are your people. And
this is my family.
This is your family, exactly.
This is my constituents. This is my home. This is. Yeah, I mean, to say that this has been. Anyway, this isn't about me. It's about making sure that the people of Hawaii are safe.
I'm not trying to make it about you. I'm trying to get to the core. You representing your family, you representing the people of your state, and letting us know throughout the continental United States what it feels like to go through this, to actually wake up and see on your cell phone the initial alert saying an incoming ballistic missile, take cover, find shelter. I'm a father. And I'm a husband. My first reaction would be, oh, my God, what do I do with my family? And as I read from one tweet, that's exactly what happened with one woman who woke up to this kind of tweet and found her mother and daughter crying, hidden in the garage.
That's exactly the reality that the people of Hawaii just went through. That is the stark reality of saying, how do I keep my family safe? Where do we go? Where do we find shelter? Where do we find shelter that will protect us from a nuclear bomb, from this incoming missile? And the answers to those questions they aren't there. And so, again, this is the stark reality. If you want to talk about readiness and all these other things, this is the reality that the people of Hawaii face. And if the people of this country had gone through what they just went through, they would be just as angry as I am.
Yeah, I'm going to bring in my colleague Laura Engel as well, Congresswoman. I'm just so appreciative of the fact that you've been able to reach out to us and talk to us on the phone, and our hearts go out to you as well as all the people there.
Absolutely.
And the beauty, there's no beauty in this. The great thing is that this is a false alarm. We must stress that. This is a false alarm. Nonetheless, it is a serious false alarm in the fact that it caused panic and it caused people to run for cover. And we're on the phone, for those of you just joining us, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard and my colleague Laura Engel here.
And, you know, some of the tweets as you guys were talking, I wanted to read some of what we're seeing on Twitter. One person writes, a friend with relatives in Hawaii who got the message on the phone said it was pandemonium, that people were panicking, cars were screeching, no one knew what to do. There was real fear and real terror. Another person writing 35 agonizing minutes. There's still, you know, we're trying to figure out exactly how long this went on, 35 minutes, 37 minutes. Somebody else.
At this point, does it matter?
It doesn't really matter. You just know that it was over 30 minutes. And, you know, somebody also wrote on Twitter today, imagine if this happened during a weekday in, say, New York or California. Like, imagine what that would look like wherever you are watching us right now, what that would feel like, what you would do, where you would go, who you would call, how would you react? That is what is starting to sink in as we start to wrap our heads around what the people of Hawaii and the visitors of Hawaii have been dealing with today, Kelly.
In fact, Congresswoman, are you still with us?
I am.
What's the population of Hawaii?
Just over 1.3 million.
So that's 1.3 million people, and out of that, you would, the fact that so many have cell phones, you would obviously imagine that the majority of those people receive this text, only to wait, well, we still don't know the time, but perhaps 30, 35 minutes later to find out that it was a false alarm. So one could certainly understand, as Laura was talking about, those tweets that came in describing for us just how much of a panic there was, and you yourself saying that you're angry. So I've got to ask you, why are you angry?
I'm angry that the people of Hawaii went through this today in the first place. I'm angry that we are, as a people, as a country, sitting in a position due to the failure of past leaders where a false alarm, a mistaken alert like this is not something that can be brushed off because the reality of the threat exists. This very well could have been a real alert. And the people of my home state of Hawaii would have been left freaking out, wondering where could they possibly find shelter from an incoming nuclear attack from North Korea. This is something that leaders in our country have not taken seriously for far too long, as a disservice to the people of my home state and the people of this country. There is no more time to waste. That is the bottom line, and I hope the rest of the people in this country can understand what our families in Hawaii just went through today, what they're still reeling from, and urge leaders in this country, urge President Trump to take action, to engage with North Korea directly, talk to him, find a way to denuclearize so that we don't have to deal with the reality of this threat, so that no one else has to go through what the people of Hawaii just went through this morning.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard talking to us today on America's News headquarters, and very sobering thoughts from you, Congresswoman, and certainly understandable. And from Laura and myself, as well as those of us here at Fox News, we are comforted in knowing that this was a false alarm, but we certainly hear you loud and clear, and we think the rest of the nation understands your concern and your anger and your plea for getting it together and dealing with North Korea. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, Kelly, we want to bring in Jonathan Wachtel, former communications director at the U.S. mission to the UN, a friend of ours here at Fox News. Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for being with us today.
Hi, Laura. Pleasure being here.
All right, so I just want to get your first initial reaction to when you saw just what we all saw on our phones here on the mainland, you know, that there was a false alarm in Hawaii, and you could imagine right away what people were going through. What were your initial thoughts, Jonathan?
You know, it's sad to say, but it was sort of a thought of it's a matter of time until you would have something like this happen. I mean, obviously, a false alarm like this is completely unacceptable, and we have to get to the bottom of what transpired here and make sure that our systems are tight and capable of pulling off what they're supposed to do for the public. There's obviously a major problem here. But what it is a stark reminder, as the Congresswoman was saying, that we have a couple of crises happening right now that are utterly dangerous. We have a North Korea that is perfecting getting nuclear weapons onto intercontinental ballistic missiles that are capable of causing mass casualties. And Hawaii, just like Japan, and the Japanese, by the way, for months now have been dealing with air raids. They themselves have been dealing with the fear of having a North Korean missile fall out of the sky and hit them, or hit one of their shipping vessels out at sea where some of these missiles have come down. These are real problems that need to be addressed.
Absolutely. Now, somebody who, as we all know here at Fox, has been following world affairs for as long as you have, and the time you've spent over at the United Nations, you know, what do you foresee happening in the coming weeks, in the coming days, as reaction to this? Because it's obviously, as the Congresswoman said, and you said, that the reality of this threat is real, and she said there is no more time to waste. What could we see happening in these next few days and weeks?
Hopefully this will cause some more stirrings and impetus to get things done more rapidly, to try to move things along, to try to get a negotiated settlement with the North Koreans, if that's at all possible. I mean, obviously, Kim Jong-un is not the most easy person to deal with. He is at the center of the current crisis. He's the man who's threatening our citizens at the moment, and why people are living in fear in Hawaii and other parts of the world because of his erratic behavior and his set development of these nuclear weapons to ensure his survival and the survival of his dastardly regime. So we need to move on these things very rapidly. Hopefully we'll get more traction at the United Nations, but ultimately it comes down to us and our policy and how we're going to handle the North Koreans, because it really is a problem between our two nations and trying to resolve this. There are some positive signs that we've seen with the South Koreans and talking about the Olympics, but that's small potatoes compared to what we're dealing here with in terms of a nuclear threat to our citizens.
An incredible day unfolding before us. Jonathan Wachtel, thank you so much for being with us today to discuss these matters. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
And as we continue to follow the developments of this breaking story out of Hawaii, and that's the fact that it received an alarm, a false alarm about an attack, a ballistic missile coming in to strike and people to take shelter. We want to hear from resident Alex Michaels right now. Alex, where do you live in Hawaii?
I'm on the west side, so we're over in Makakilo, Hawaii.
Tell me what you encountered this morning.
It was probably about 8 o'clock, early morning, and was just laying in bed, and my wife frantically comes running into the room, showing me the phone, saying that a ballistic missile was inbound and that this was not a false alarm. Or not a false alarm, but not a drill. And so we kind of just let it sink in for a moment and started texting all of our friends because we're, on an area where I guess a couple months ago when the Hawaii newspaper here had released saying this was a blast zone area, we knew that it'd be safe on the west side. So we just started texting our friends, and it got really really scary when a particular friend of ours, a few of them who live on base, didn't have any clear-cut notice or understanding of the situation, and when they, didn't really have any answers for us either, and other than that they were told to go west as well. We just kind of sat back and waited for direction.
You waited for direction, and so was there a sense of bewilderment, not knowing? Do you turn to the left? Do you turn to the right? Do you seek cover somewhere? And was there any sense at all? And how long did it go on before you found some answers?
It probably, honestly, from the get-go, I think it was just try to stay calm, because obviously something like that, you can't really do anything other than hide and cover. So it was try to get our thoughts gathered in a way that we could go about it. It was probably about an hour until we finally got the okay to say that this is just a drill. And even yet, there's still a little bit of speculation of, well, is it? What's the glitch? What's that? And so it's still just like an uncertainty of, not like, oh, is it safe to go out? But it just doesn't really feel very comfortable right now for how beautiful a day it is.
Yeah, and even now I sense that you're still a little nervous, and there's some a sense of unease there. But I want to read something to you real quickly, Michael. It's from the governor, who's been meeting with the State Department of Defense as well as the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency to determine what caused this morning's false alarm and to prevent it from happening again. Here's what the governor says. He says, while I am thankful this morning's alert was a false alarm, the public must have confidence in our emergency alert system. I am working to get to the bottom of this so we can prevent an error of this type in the future. If you do this in places like Israel, if there's some false alarm or human error, it can be punishable by law. They take this very seriously because they live in an area where they're constantly under the possibility of war or strikes from missiles. What type of proactivity would you like to see your state government take resulting from today's false alarm?
Well, I think first and foremost, the important thing is to restore that relationship with the public and restore that trust, because, it's the old story of the boy who cried wolf. What's going to happen one day where it does go off and it says this is not a drill, and you got half the population here saying, oh, maybe it is. It was last time, and then, and it's just something that, God forbid, never, ever happened. But I think they're going to have to restore the trust in the public and then implement any type of, they got to crack down on the system, or something's got to go on, because it's not something to be taken lightly, especially just in recent, weeks and months of the tensions that are going on. It's something that we live in. We have that sense, I guess, it's always there with us, living in Hawaii and the closest state technically to all the tension that's going on. It's a lot for us. So when something like this kind of goes on, it's hard. It's a little unsettling because we live in a constant fear, but we still go on with our lives. And
Alex, I think you've stated it very well. We go on with our lives, and that's what all Americans do. We go on with our lives, whether the threat is real or whether it's false, and we go through the whole complete, furor and pandemonium resulting from a false alarm. But what you stated was very clearly, we have to have the public have that restoration of trust in its government. Yeah. All right. Thank you, sir. All right.
Okay.
And as we move on, we want to bring you all up to speed. We are continuing to monitor the situation that has happened in Hawaii today with a false alarm that went out to residents and visitors. Anybody who had a smartphone or a phone that could receive a message saying that there was an inbound missile to take cover. It was not a drill. 30 minutes plus passed before people were told that it was a false alarm. Now, as people are trying to get to the bottom of it, we are also trying to talk to some some lawmakers and figure out exactly what has gone on, Kelly, as we move forward with the afternoon, trying to get some more information. And looking back, November of 2017, Hawaii did, in fact, bring back the Cold War era nuclear warning siren. So as we're starting to get some of that tape in now of what it sounded like in Hawaii, we'll bring that to you shortly after the break. You hear those sirens. You can imagine running out into the street, as many people are reporting they did. A lot of people didn't know what to do. What does take shelter mean exactly to you? That is something that people are trying to figure out. We'll be right back after this.
We continue to follow this breaking development story about the false alarm that took place in Hawaii about a ballistic missile being on course for Hawaii and telling people to take cover, that this is not a drill, and then later to find out, subsequent to that it was, in fact, a false alarm. So we're getting this now from a White House official. The president has been briefed on the state of Hawaii's emergency management exercise. This was purely a state exercise. Let's bring in Jonathan Wachtel, former communications director at the U.S. mission to the UN. Jonathan, what do you make of that?
Look, it's too early right now, Kelly, to make judgment calls. We have to really figure out what's going on here, because the speculation can cause a lot of disruption and confusion, and we need to really get to the bottom. This is not a trivial matter. We have to get this right. We have to figure out what went wrong here. We have to figure out whether that indeed was a message that was prepped by our government in terms of circumstances like this and what gets sent out, whether there was a hack. A lot of conspiracy out there. Really don't want to rush to any conclusions here.
But the fact that the White House is stating that it was an exercise, or at least that's what they're being told, and we heard from people on the ground right there in Hawaii, including the Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who is extremely outraged that this happened in the first place. We've got to get to the bottom of this.
Yes, we do. Look, you don't do a test on the general public of Hawaii,
without alerting them and letting them know.
No, of course not. And it should have been an internal thing. And somehow the system has run into some sort of problem here. And it cannot happen like that. And of course, the government's not going to do something as irresponsible as to run a test on the entire Hawaiian population in such a way that would cause such chaos. So there, all this has to be worked out. Perhaps indeed, as you're hearing, the intent was to do a test, but obviously this has been completely mismanaged.
Okay, grant you that, and we'll obviously we'll get more details as we follow the developments of this breaking story. But now we're getting caught in the fog of the information that's coming from official perspective. And so we, the people, and particularly the people living there in Hawaii, their hands are tied. They don't know what's going on. They know that this has been a false drill. But again, getting to the point of what the Congresswoman talked about, it still makes her angry with the fact that this took place in the first place because of what's going on in the larger picture with the threat and tensions with North Korea.
Kelly, it's multiple problems here. One is you want to have a full, safe system in which the public can feel confident that if there is indeed a crisis, that they will be alerted and there's a system in place to help them. They don't want to be in a position in which you do have a false alarm like this. The sky is falling and everybody panics. That serves no purpose. What we can learn, there are a lot of things we can learn from this. And I'm an optimist by nature, and we'll figure out what happened here. Obviously, there's going to be tremendous scrutiny on trying to figure out what went wrong, how the mechanism fell apart, whether there was outside interference or not, or just some stupid human glitch. Or an electronic glitch that caused this. All this has to be fixed, and that's the positive thing, that we're going to get to the bottom of what went wrong here, and thankfully it wasn't a missile fired, so we can deal with this and allow saner minds and rational minds to come together and try to grapple with the problem and safeguard us in a better way. So that's all the positive stuff. Dealing with the immediacy of how to deal with this, I mean, I can understand the dismay of the Hawaiian people. I can understand the dismay of their representatives who are out there to protect their very people. And again, this is a reminder that there is an overriding threat that's hanging over all of our heads. It's, you know, the ICBM capabilities of North Korea, as they themselves have boasted, and we are concerned, they are capable of hitting just about anywhere in the United States. And if they can get a nuclear payload on one of those ICBMs, we, meaning we, all Americans, no matter where we are potentially within range of what could be a catastrophic situation.
Again, I go back to Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who went on to say that the president has to be tough, he has to be firm, and he's been that way in terms of his rhetoric with Kim Jong-un. But she went on to say that he must seek direct talks with North Korea and get this resolved. What do you say?
Direct talks would be wonderful. If we could sit down and have rational discussions with the North Koreans, that would be the optimal situation. Obviously, it's not so easy. It's not so easy when you have a country that's terrified of the United States and threatening the United States and capable of doing all sorts of dastardly things. I mean, Kim Jong-un has been absolutely horrific to his own people, let alone threatening the American people. He's all about his own survival and the survival of his support team and cronies and ensuring longevity of the North Korean regime. He'll do anything to make sure that he stays within power. And he's willing to take this right to the edge, which he's done. So we have to obviously cautiously be prepared to take whatever action we need to take as a country to defend ourselves and our citizens, and at the same time try as best as we can to figure out a diplomatic way to get through this, whether it's back-channel discussions, whether it's trying to coax them into something beyond what's going to happen with the sort of somewhat warming of relations with South Korea over trying to get into the Olympics.
That's an encouraging element, but the discouraging element would be the fact that Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin, has praised Kim Jong-un. And so that puffs him up and perhaps causes him to do even more and be more provocative in his actions.
The more that Kim Jong-un thinks that he has someone covering his back, of course, the more he'll pull off his antics and feel confident that he's able to squeeze the Americans and try to get concessions out of the Americans or frighten the American people and put pressure on President Trump. Yes, it's unhelpful to have Vladimir Putin say anything complimentary about Kim Jong-un. I don't know why you would say something complimentary about Kim Jong-un. This is not a person that you hold up in some sort of great esteem. This is a murderous regime that imprisons their own people and cracks down on dissent and is starving their people to run this nuclear program. There's nothing positive to say about the man.
It's a Saturday afternoon, and we're talking about North Korea stemming from a false alarm that took place in Hawaii about a ballistic missile, underscoring how much tension there is.
That's right, Kelly.
All right. We have got to go. We are going to be back right after this break. Stay with us as we continue to bring you the very latest on this false alarm of the Hawaii situation. We'll be back.